First of all, I'm happy that Eileen Ryan was able to join us today. Eileen Ryan is the leader of Beyond Plastic for Boston and a trained public speaker on plastic pollution. She is also on the steering committee of Plastic Free Mass. In addition to her work educating people about the perils of plastic, she uses her creative talents to make costumes and art as a climate and social justice activist. Eileen lives in Watertown and is the mother of 3 grown children and the grandmother of 2. And before I formally turn this over to Eileen, I'm just going to comment that we are co-hosting an event at the venue. It's the Lexington movie theater with other climate groups called The Plastic Detox. It is on Netflix. If you have Netflix, you could watch it there. But Eileen has the rights to show it publicly, so we're going to be showing it May 5th at 7 o'clock at the venue. And Eileen will be there, and also Bridget Lee, an MD, who will talk about plastics after the presentation.
Thank you, Linnell.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent film. I hope many of you can watch it, Detox Plastic, and we will be talking. It's a film that focuses primarily on the health effects of plastics, which I will also be talking about during my presentation. So this is my hat that I made to take down to the State House advocating for an expanded bottle bill. I also wore it in New York City. You'll see a picture of me wearing it, but I'm going to take it off now because it's kind of shadowing my face. I also have a plastic straw necklace. All these straws were collected on the streets of Watertown where I live. And yeah, it's a little sharp at times, but I think it looks quite nice. But anyway, so what is Beyond Plastics? Beyond Plastics is an organization that was founded by Judith Enck in 2019. It's based at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont. The funny thing is that I was actually born in Bennington, Vermont, and I grew up there. It's in the southwestern corner of Vermont. So Judith Enck was the EPA director for the region 2 of the EPA. So that included New York, New Jersey, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and I think 5 or 7 different tribal nations. So she was the region 2 EPA director during the 8 years of the Obama administration. And when her job was up, she knew she wanted to do something that was the intersection of climate change, environmental justice, and plastics. And I don't think there are any other organizations that work on legislative change related to plastics. And as Judith likes to say, their modest goal is to end plastic pollution. So when you learn some stuff today, maybe you will get involved in helping to end plastic pollution yourselves. So how did I get involved in all of this? So I'm actually one of the rare people who's known about the health effects of plastics since the 1980s. Some of the research started being done at that time. I have tried to keep plastic out of my life. I have brought my own cloth bags shopping for decades. And then in 2010, I saw a movie at my local public library called Bag It, which was all about getting rid of banning single-use plastic shopping bags. And I was like, oh, okay, there's one focused thing I can do. And so I got involved in a group in Watertown. They called themselves the Bag. Oh, my daughter called us the Bag Ladies because we were all women. We called ourselves Rethink Plastic. And in 2016, we passed the ordinance banning single-use plastic shopping bags in Watertown. And I thought, wow, I've done my good deed. I don't really need to do any more about plastics. And then I saw this movie, The Story of Plastic. See, these documentary films have a big effect on me. The Story of Plastic is an incredible film, came out in 2020. That was produced by The Story of Stuff. That's an organization based in California that has done a lot around consumerism and plastics. I highly recommend all their films. They have a lot of short film clips too. And Linnell, maybe I can send you a list of resources afterwards that you can offer to everybody who's on the call today and in the room. So I saw this movie and I was appalled by the images of plastic pollution around the world. And I immediately started to figure out how I could screen that movie. Now, this is during the pandemic. And one of the discussions about the film that I watched online was led by Judith Enck. And she told us that she offers a class on plastic pollution. And I signed up for it that night. So in the winter of 2021, I took this amazing course with Judith Enck, where I learned a lot more about plastic. And one of the things I learned was that 50% of all plastic ever produced has been produced in the past 20 years. So, and then I just came up with this statistic this morning. Plastic waste in the US has increased from 60 pounds per person in 1980 to 218 pounds per person in 2018. I think it's awful when you start to learn about the implications of this kind of production of plastic. It's appalling, and you start to see images like this around the world. I felt like I had to do something about it. Nobody can do anything about this alone. We are all working together. That is why Beyond Plastics Greater Boston is one of the local groups of Beyond Plastics, and we now have 150 different local groups that are based in 40 different states around the country. It's a way to get the grassroots involved in advocating for legislative change and corporate accountability. So how did we get into this mess? So basic plastics started to be introduced in the late 19th century. Things like shellac, which comes from the lac bug, I think, lacquer and shellac. And then we started getting polyvinyl chloride, and some basic uses for plastics were starting to come in the early part of the 20th century. But then it's during World War II that the production of plastic really takes off. So these are Rosie the Riveters, who are making cockpits for planes. And one of the reasons plastics is taking off is because places like DuPont and Dow are producing more of the materials to produce these chemical plastics, but also because there are shortages of silk. Like silk was used in parachutes, and then we replaced that with nylon. And this was the fun thing that I learned when I actually was in Honolulu on Pearl Harbor Day a couple of years ago. And I met a Rosie the Riveter who was in her 80s. And she said that her job had been, like these boys here, was to collect milkweed fluff to go into life jackets. So that's another thing that's been totally replaced. We used to use these natural fibers and natural, plants and that kind of thing. And now it's all been replaced with plastic. So after World War II, now we have this production capability and we have these resources. And so the big companies, again, I mentioned them briefly, Dow and DuPont, start really pushing to have plastics used by the general population. So you start seeing housewares, like in this image on the side with plastics American as apple pie. They're making dishes out of plastic, wrapping everything in cellophane until the point. And more textiles are now starting to be made out of plastics. I mean, a lot of people don't really think of textiles as a big source of plastic pollution, but they are, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And then you start seeing all your food wrapped in plastic. So this image is from the early 50s, I think. And then there was a concerted campaign to get Americans to start thinking about single use, throwing things away. Up until this point, like I grew up with my mother always saying, waste not, want not. And I know a lot of New Englanders grew up with use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. So it was really, really hard to get Americans to start throwing things away. But this is a famous picture from Life magazine showing like this is the new generation, the throwaway culture, and it has wreaked havoc across the world, actually. So this is an interesting statistic. 40% of all plastic is used for packaging. So it's handled like once and then thrown away. You'll notice here the textiles are the fourth largest contributor to plastic pollution, and building and construction. So this is from 2015, this slide, and I don't know where building and construction is exactly right now, but I'm sure it's getting close to packaging. You're seeing more and more building materials made out of plastics, plastic fencing, decks, doors, cabinets, flooring, and none of it is good for us. So what are plastics? Plastics are made from fossil fuels and chemicals. And most plastics in the United States now are made from a byproduct of fracked gas called ethane. And fracked gas, you're probably familiar with fracking, but fracking is when you go into hard rock shale foundations and you break it up, and then you get this gas, but then you have this byproduct of fracked of the fracked gas, which is the ethane. It's leading to water pollution. I've seen images in films again about plastic where people can actually light their water in their taps on fire. So most of this a lot of the fracking goes on in Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Ohio River Valley. We don't have the right type of shale in Massachusetts for fracking, but New York State banned fracking a while ago. But unfortunately, there's threats to all kinds of these bans that have happened. But the other thing is fracked gas does run through our pipelines, and you're probably familiar with the fact that a lot of ethane is coming off of is being leaked from the pipelines. So the other thing about plastics, so the chemicals in plastics are just sort of laid on top of the bond here, and they basically fall out or leach out into our food from our clothing. And there's 4 categories over there on the right: toxic additives, phthalates, bisphenols, PFAS, and flame retardants. And all of those have health consequences. So this is a slide that's originally from Dr. Philip Landegren, who's based in Newton, Massachusetts. And at the time that this slide was made, 13,000 chemicals were being used, but now it's over 16,000. And most of these chemicals have not been tested for toxicity, and they're links to all kinds of health issues, cancers, obesogens. So here talks a little bit more about the endocrine disrupting chemicals. They bioaccumulate in our bodies. They are contributing to all these different health epidemics. The movie that I hope you'll see on the 5th of May, Detox Plastic, really addresses infertility, but it does have a happy ending. So don't be too scared off by that. But children and infants, children, and pregnant mothers are especially vulnerable to all of these chemicals. And the other issue is that it's actually costing us billions of dollars to care for people who have been affected by these chemicals. That quotation, almost $250 billion in U.S. healthcare attributed in 2018. That's from Dr. Leo Tresande's book, Sick or Fat or Poor, which I also recommend. And Dr. Leo Tresande is in the movie Detox Plastic. He's in a lot of the movies that talk about plastics. So the other issue, besides the chemicals in plastics, and I heard some of you talking that you've already learned about microplastics, is microplastics. So this is a cartoon came out a few years ago, making a joke about the fact that we are consuming a credit card's worth of microplastics in a week. So this is a joke. The guy's about to grade up the plastic credit card there. So how are we getting all these microplastics into our bodies? Well, microplastics are now in the air we breathe, in the water we drink, and in the soil that grows our food. So they're everywhere, right? And they have been found in every part of our bodies. I think, is there anything here that's been found since then? This is from 2024, and there is definitely correlation between the microplastics in our bodies and different health impacts. Especially concerning, I find, is the Alzheimer's. So a lot of these diseases have tripled and quadrupled over the past 20 years when we've seen that exponential rise in plastic production. But the study about Alzheimer's and microplastics was done by Dr. Matthew Campen. He's based in New Mexico, and they took cadavers from 2016 and then I think 2022. Anyway, it wasn't that huge a difference in time, but they knew how the people had died, and they studied their brains. And the people who had died of Alzheimer's had more microplastics in their brains, and the brains of the people from more recently had more than the people from 10 years ago. Okay, so why is this happening? The petrochemical industry is huge. They have all these plants across the United States. They're planning to build many, many more. And right now, plastic production is projected to increase by 170% from just 6 years ago to 2040. This is extremely concerning. I don't know how we're going to be able to actually survive with this amount of plastic in our lives. There is an area along the Mississippi River that goes from Baton Rouge to New Orleans that is called Cancer Alley, because the people who live along that corridor are so exposed to the emissions from the petrochemical plants that are all based along here. Now, Sharon Levine is an amazing activist and organizer. She started this group called Rise St. James that protested the building of the Formosa plastics plant in her area. But many of her friends have died of cancer. You'll see her also interviewed in the Detox film and some of the other great movies that are out there, like Plastic People. We're all plastic people now. She's been very successful in pushing back against the industry. She's been to Washington many times. Formosa Plastics is based in Thailand. The other thing to realize that plastics is a huge environmental justice issue. So this is a slide that was created for the Atlantic Monthly several years ago now, 5 years ago, and that shows where the sugar cane plantations were based along the Mississippi River and how those are the yellow, and then the red is the petrochemical plants. So the people who are the descendants of the formerly enslaved along this corridor, can't refer to as Cancer Alley, are the people who are living there. And a lot of these plantations were used because they were big tracts of land that the petrochemical companies could buy up as one big parcel. And many of the people who were white and wealthy in that area were, well, they might not have been wealthy, but better off, were paid for their land, but the Black community was not. So this is Dr. Robert Bullard. Is the person who came up with the whole idea of not the idea, but the concept of environmental justice. And he's written many books. One is, I'll think of the titles in a minute, but he's still alive. He's based in Texas. He's a professor of sociology, but he realized that the effects of pollution are much stronger on communities of color and low-income communities. And that is true in Massachusetts too. So, we have, I think 11 different incinerators in Massachusetts to deal with our waste, and they are all based in lower income communities. So the United States has 4% of the world's population, but we generate 12% of the world's solid waste, and we use up 24% of the world's natural resources. So even though white people only make up 20% of the world's population, we are responsible for 61% of the global carbon emissions. And this is another issue with plastics. So this is showing the plume from the burning of the polyvinyl chloride that spilled in East Palestine, Ohio in 2023, in February 2023, where this was a crazy idea. There are these very, very long train cars that carry a lot of the chemicals and the nurdles, which are the basis of plastic, that are going through the Ohio River Valley, through Appalachia, and they're going all over the country. But when there was this accident where the trains tumbled off, partly because they're so long, they're more prone to have these accidents. But they decided to set this train car full of polyvinyl chloride on fire. And the people in this community suffered, and still are suffering the health consequences of that. So these are all interconnected, all these issues, right? So the other issue with plastics is because, as you just learned, they're made from fossil fuels, so they are contributing to the climate crisis. So as we're seeing, hopefully, a transition to cleaner transportation and housing, more fuel efficient houses and transportation, the fossil fuel industry and petrochemical industry is transitioning to plastics. So as they see more electric cars and more solar and wind energy being used, they're pouring all their money into plastic pollution, into plastic production, I should say. So this is a funny image I came across of a woman shopping in the 1970s. And although I don't think she's making the most healthful purchases for her family here, you can see that the packaging for the food is in cardboard, glass, and metal, which is the big contrast to what we see a lot today, like all this cut up fruit in plastic containers. Beyond Plastics, and my group in particular, has actually targeted Trader Joe's at one point to try and get them to stop packaging so much of their food in plastic. And it seemed like we were a little bit successful for a while, but now I'm seeing even more of this kind of craziness in the stores. There's another woman on the Plastic Speakers Bureau with Beyond Plastics who had a teenager say to her, she was talking at a high school. Well, what do you do instead of buying pre-cut pineapple and melon? It's like, well, you buy the whole fruit, you cut it up yourself, right? So who's the #1 producer of plastics? ExxonMobil. I feel like when people realize that, they finally make the connection between plastics and the climate crisis. So even a lot of climate activists don't really see plastics as a major concern. So if plastics were a country, I used to say it would be the 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter, but I was just reading on the Beyond Plastics website this morning that it's now considered the 4th largest. So after China, US, India comes plastic, because the US plastic industry is responsible for 232 million tons of CO2 emissions every year. To me, this was one of the most shocking things I learned when I first started working on this, 5 years ago. And all right, and this is another thing I just learned this morning. As of 2024, the emissions from plastics were 4 times greater than the global aviation sector. So I maybe some of you are also involved in the Stop Private Jet Expansion campaign at Hanscom and elsewhere. But when we always think, I always think, oh, airplanes are such a huge consumer of fossil fuels, but to think that plastics are actually more than that is shocking to me. So what about recycling? Okay, so that recycling is an idea that was actually put forth by the plastics industry. The idea of recycling plastics, not recycling in general. So recycling for wood, glass, and metal, keep on doing it, but it's very, very difficult to recycle plastic. Most plastic can only be downcycled into something that can be sold one more time, and the whole process of recycling is in and of itself toxic. It releases tons of microplastics, and to make a new plastic out of some, it cannot be 100% plastic. You have a recycled plastic. You have to add tons of chemicals to it. This is an image from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. So that's another funny thing, is you get these greenwashing terms. Like you think, oh, Alliance to End Plastic Waste, that sounds really great. And then you find out that ExxonMobil, Dow, Shell, Chevron, Phillips, and Total Energies are all part of that alliance. They are some of the biggest contributors to plastic pollution. So when you see those chasing arrows on the bottom of a plastic container, they will tell you what type of plastic you are looking at, and you can actually recycle numbers 1 and 2, and occasionally 5, but all the other ones cannot be recycled at all. And in Massachusetts, in terms of recycling, we really need to update our bottle bill, because that is the best way to ensure that glass, metal, and plastic will be truly recycled, because it won't be cross-contaminated. Right now in Massachusetts, only about 26% of glass is being recycled. Primarily, it's being used as landfill cover, or it's being put into asphalt. So yeah, so only 8.5% of plastic ever made has ever been recycled, and it's actually Beyond Plastics did a very comprehensive study in 2021 or 2022 and found out that it's actually closer to 5% in the U.S. So it's a lot of plastic promises out there, right? So this is kind of showing you what happens with plastic. So as I said earlier, most waste in general in Massachusetts is being incinerated, but in other parts of the country, most of it is going into landfills. And then you wonder, like, how does all this stuff get in the ocean? Well, some of it blows off of trucks, it blows off of the landfills, it's getting into the soil from the landfills. And again, very little is getting recycled here. So have you heard of any of these pay to recycle plans? So Ridwell in particular has been coming after Massachusetts in the fall, and in like late August, early September. They went to many communities in Massachusetts. Most of them were eco-conscious, environmentally friendly types of communities like Amherst, Northampton, Cambridge, Newburyport. They came to Newton. They were in then in this winter, they were back here again. Well, these do not fall prey to these pay-to-play recycle scams. That is what they are. They are making money off of your guilt about plastic trash. They end up often shipping their material. Well, some of it gets shipped to facilities that can't actually deal with the amount of amount of waste they're getting. Some is ending up in other countries like Mexico, and some is ending up in storage in large warehouses. And plastic is highly flammable because it's, again, made out of fossil fuel chemicals. And sometimes these fires will start, which is another issue with the construction materials, right? So last year when we had all the wildfires in California, they were very, very toxic because of the amount of plastic that was burned in them. I mean, a lot of wildfires don't cover houses, right? They don't cover buildings. The fires are all in the woods, which is much less toxic. So the other issue is bioplastics. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll switch to compostable plastics. People tell me that all the time. Oh, Eileen, we're gonna have all compostable, dishware at this event or whatever. And I'll kind of roll my eyes, but it's still, most of the compostable plastics are made from a sugar cane, which is, a crop highly intensive, but they're still made. So fossil fuels are extinct, decomposed natural materials, but now you're using stuff that was just cut, used, whatever. But they have even more chemicals are being added to some of these compostable plastics. So I don't know if I didn't really say this, but the reason chemicals are added to plastics is to make them rigid, pliable, keep them from flame retardants. They're still pretty flammable. That was a little bit on the slide back earlier. Okay, so, and then where are we seeing these microplastics? So this is showing a microplastic filament in a snowflake right here, and being taken up in a stem of a plant. So this was actually in a controlled experiment, but the problem is plastic is ending up in our soils now. And there's a scene, I just watched the movie Plastic People last night at a screening at the Malden Public Library, and they do have a scene there of a man who's an anti-plastic activist talking about how even now eating an apple, the healthiest of foods, you would think might have microplastics in it. But please stick with whole foods. Do not try, I don't mean the store, I mean real food. And do not be, can't let that get you too discouraged. But this is showing again how plastic is ending up in the soil. Some soils now cannot even absorb water. They have so much plastic in them. Partly this is when black plastic is used as a mulch, and then it gets turned back into the soil. It's very, we need clean air, clean water, and healthful soils. It's very important for our health and for the health of the world. So this is another amazing image of microplastics on it's a kind of beetle that was taken up in Adirondacks, where there's no manufacturing of plastics anywhere nearby. And look, it's absolutely covered with these microplastics. So again, it goes to show how they're getting into the air and the water. So we talked a little bit earlier about how fast fashion and synthetic fibers are the fourth largest contributor to plastic pollution. This was an ad I saw on the subway platform in New York for Woolrich, which I loved, right? It shows half of her covered in fossil fuels melting. But if you have a choice, and again, plastic pollution is not your fault, but if you have a choice to choose food that's not wrapped in plastic, clothing that's not made from synthetic materials, please do that. So we are also absorbing the chemicals and plastics through our skin, right? So I have, as you heard, I had 3 children and they're all married, and I have told them all, do not wear synthetic athletic wear, because the hotter you get, the more you sweat, the more the chemicals and the plastics are going to leach into your skin. So if you can, choose cotton, hemp, linen, silk, and wool. There's a great website called Fiber Shed that has a lot of advice about textiles. The other thing I was just learning about is you probably know that in Massachusetts, you're no longer allowed to throw textiles into the trash. So in Watertown, we have paired up with HelpSee, which is an organization that says it's recycling recycling all kinds of textiles. I have tried to arrange like a field trip with them. I was very skeptical, and now this article just came out in the New York Times last week, and Susan Keefe, who's on the staff at Beyond Plastics, is quoted in it. A lot of that clothing that they are taking, they're just giving it to the Goodwill, or they are shipping it off to places like Ghana. And well, you're going to see also in a second, I think, the Atacama Desert. This is in Chile. But some of it's being used for filling mattresses and for making punching bags. But a lot of it ends up dumped. So, fast fashion really took off in the 1990s. I mean, they've exploited cheap labor around the world. I was shocked, like when my kids were growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I was like, how can clothing be cheaper now than it was in the 1960s? And why is it cheaper now to buy your clothes than it is to make them? Well, it all has to do with the fast fashion industry. And I think it's like something like 60% or more of clothing now is made from synthetic fibers. And it also is one of the biggest contributors to plastic pollution in the oceans, because the microfibers from our clothing get rinsed off when they're washed and end up in our waterways. So we talked a little bit about the chemicals in plastics, but I have to say I cannot give a talk without talking about artificial turf. So artificial turf is a huge use of plastic. And again, it's part of the petrochemical industry's big push to use more and more plastic. I don't know where Lexington stands on this, but I have been involved in pushing back against artificial turf, and it is almost impossible to get a community not to install it. They have greenwashed all the politicians over it. This was in Newton, Albemarle Field. The sign on one side I made, not the sign on the other. The poster, the beautiful poster, our Keep Our Park Green Natural Living Grass, that's made by a friend who lives in Malden, who is working on the Roosevelt Park installation of artificial turf, which is in a low-income housing area, and the only grass they have is inside of this apartment complex, and they're trying to put artificial turf in there. But they have actually been pretty successful. Newton, we were not successful, and they're installing it right now. I just saw it last week. They're working on it. It creates heat islands. It off-gases chemicals. It is not good for children. Of course, it's creating more and more microplastics. So 15 million tons of plastics enter our oceans every year. That is the equivalent of 2 dump trucks worth of plastics an hour. I think it's an hour. Yeah. It's outrageous. But for a long time, people thought that that's all plastics was an ocean pollution issue. But now we know it is more than that. It also affects all kinds of sea life. So this is the carcass of an albatross that its entire belly is filled with all these plastic bottle caps and other things. So wildlife sees the bright colors. They often think things that are pink and orange and red are shrimp. But the other thing is the plastic debris that's in the ocean begins to smell like organisms that they are used to eating. And it's I just read this morning, like whales are consuming something like 10,000 microplastics a day. Yeah, it's just really disheartening. So who are the 10 worst plastic polluters? Well, we know this information because the Break Free from Plastic, which is based in England, but it's a global organization, does waste audits every year around the world. And if you're doing a trash cleanup, please do a waste audit while you're at it, because that information is really helpful. So that is how we know that Coca-Cola is the #1 plastic polluter in the world. PepsiCo is #2. Nestle. This slide is a few years old now. These shift a little bit, but Coca-Cola always comes out on top. This was a funny cartoon I saw in Martha's Vineyard last summer. The Jaws, the shark, is saying he now doesn't want to eat a person anymore because we're all full of PFAS chemicals, microplastics, processed food, prescription medications. So we have made some progress around PFAS in Massachusetts. I mean, it's a huge issue. Are you all familiar with they're called forever chemicals, per and polyfluorinated alkalides? I think I got that right. I work in coalition with Clean Water Action that has a whole campaign right now to get PFAS bans passed on the statewide level. We were successful in getting PFAS out of firefighter foam in Massachusetts. Anyway, don't eat anything with don't use pans with Teflon that they all have PFAS. PFAS was used as stain resistant material. So what I was going to say is that we also, beyond Plastics Greater Boston, also pairing up with Clean Water Action, We did work on a campaign that was a national campaign to get REI to stop using PFAS. REI, the camping equipment company, stop using PFAS on their rainwear and camping equipment. So yeah, so the government is a lot of, on the federal level especially, is in the hands of the petrochemical industry, as our Senator Ed Markey likes to say. It's a socialist organization. We give them so many tax dollars that they're so heavily subsidized, and that's why plastic often seems cheap. I was actually thinking with this war going on, maybe we would see a reduction in the amount of plastic, but it turns out that because we have access to all the fracked gas and ethane, and Dow and DuPont are right now making more money than they ever have before, and they're producing more and more plastics here. So what do we do when your bathtub's overflowing? This is a picture. I had my husband tip this picture of me a few years ago in our bathtub. I collected all these single-use plastics because we did, I'll show you in a minute what we did in action to show that plastic is killing us. But we need to turn off the tap. We need to turn off the tap. We need to stop making all this plastic, because if we don't, it's going to kill us. So this is part of my friend Katrin Spies. She created this performance art piece called Death by Plastic. She started out she has a clear plastic coffin. We fill it with single-use plastics, and then somebody gets into it. So she started by doing one where she was in it, and the coffin was on a gondola in Venice. And she got a lot of attention for that. Actually, a scene that was supposed to be in the Detox movie was us staging a funeral down Fifth Avenue in New York from Central Park to St. Peter's Cathedral, but it got cut out of the movie, unfortunately. But I made this. I did two of these performance pieces in Boston, one in Somerville, one downtown Boston, and then I got it. This was my Halloween card from a few years ago. All right, here's the hat and the shirt. This was at the March to End Fossil Fuels in New York City in 2023. This picture over here was in the New York Times. I like to say, I have these skills. I'm a really good sign maker and costume maker. And I know the people online can't really see what I'm wearing today, except for my necklace. But maybe after the talk's over, I can show you my dress. But if you go out and you're part of a protest, you need to be able to illustrate your message. And the images that are created from these protests are images that get used over and over again. So like here we are. This is an image from Earth Day, the first Earth Day in 1970, which led to the foundation, the foundation of the EPA, to the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act. 20 million people in the United States went out on Earth Day. So to put that in perspective, the last No Kings, we had 8 to 9 million. We need to get more people in the streets all the time. But when you have, I think it's still possible. It is still possible. So don't give up. It's still possible through collective action to make change. And this is an illustration of young people at the Massachusetts State House in December of 2019. But I really like Rebecca Solnit. She's a wonderful climate writer. She has a Substack, and she publishes Meditation in Emergency. But what she says, more than personal virtue, we need collective action at every scale. So I like to say, my virtuous self-action is what I was calling what I was doing before I got involved in advocating. They don't really make a difference, right? It's good for your own personal health to make choices where you have less plastic in your lives and to be a model for your family, if they follow it. They don't always, but getting out and being part of collective action is the solution. And I'm pretty politically involved. I'm on the Watertown Democratic Committee. And so, yeah, and I always bring up the whole issue. I talked to Maura Healey about it. I talked to Markey about it. Catherine Clark used to be very involved in the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which was a federal act to reduce the amount of plastic that we're all exposed to, but has kind of gone by the wayside with the current administration. So these are all campaigns that we have worked on with Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. What is chemical recycling? Chemical recycling is incineration of plastics. It is also referred to as pyrolysis. It's extremely toxic. It's something that we do not want to do. We keep working on all these things. And I know that Lexington has done some good work. I think you already passed the Skip the Stuff bill, right, in Lexington? And you are very fortunate to have Michelle Colo as your state rep. She's amazing. She's part of the Zero Waste Caucus at the State House, and she has been a huge proponent and supporter of all of these different bills that we have been working on. We're getting ready to, this session is coming to an end soon, July 31st, but we will keep working at the next session. So one of the big focuses that we've been pushing for this year was an update to the Massachusetts bottle bill. So our bottle bill is over 40 years old at this point. It only covers carbonated beverages, beer, seltzer, soda. And now we have all kinds of drinks that we never had before at 40 years ago, right? And the deposit is too small, and it helps to, so anyway, I have some new cards that we have in the back, let's say unbearable on them, because Polar Seltzer based in Worcester is one of the biggest hindrances to our updating the bottle bill. I will add that the environmental bond bill that is in front of, past the Senate, in front of the House right now, does have a statewide, finally, a statewide ban on plastic bags, a uniform ban, because we have over 160 different plastic bag bans in the state of Massachusetts right now. So you can write postcards. We have postcard writing parties. This is another idea of something you can do. This is Maureen McCarthy, who runs FOCO Trash Mobs based in Fort Collins, Colorado. She does this she's really into this return to offender campaign. She calls herself the Trash Mobs. She has online presentations. The latest one she's been working on is the plastic mesh bags that like onions and clementines come in, but you return the packaging to the company and they have to respond. It actually has made a difference. So I participated in Nestle's one, and she and I have written a lot to Driscoll's, the berry company in Oregon. So what can you do? You start small with your own individual actions and you keep on moving. We need institutional change. If you're in a faith community, a school, a hospital, make the changes there. Then you want to go up to legislative change and keep on, do it on your, local ordinances, statewide legislation. And of course, ultimately, we would like to see federal legislation. It really is the only way to get people to do the right thing, especially these corporations, right? So this is a lot: the climate crisis, microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So as I always like to say, it's time to organize, activate, and advocate for an end to plastic pollution. You can join my group. I have a mailing list in the back of the room, Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. We are also part of this coalition, Plastic Free Mass, which has about 40 different environmental groups and progressive political groups as part of it. And we meet every other Tuesday afternoon. And we are really working on the bottle bill, the whole Plastic Free Mass coalition. So we only have one Earth. This is a banner that I made that I put up at the State House. It was for an Earth Day event. There were a lot of people there, but I was able to get that photo. And then if you want to get more involved with Beyond Plastics, they offer these great training sessions. They're free. They're 2 hours long. There's the next set. Well, there are three 2 hours sessions, I think. Yeah. And I think the next session is coming up in July. You can also sign up to do this class. And I think probably the next session won't start until September. And there's Judith, and they're always happy to get donations. So thank you so much for listening. I am happy to answer questions, anything I can help you with. And we will, should we stop? We will stop with that slide. Yes.
You can stop sharing.
Oh, I stopped sharing. Okay, very good.
We can see it.
Yeah, I have one suggestion to you.
Yes.
This is David Kahn.
Is this
I'm
somebody
gonna
online?
retire. Yeah. My career was in engineering, but it was R&D, research and development. I didn't see any really active research and development in materials engineering, especially in the plastics area. Because I know in my business, I worked for the Air Force for years, and we all learned the hard way that a little bit of materials engineering education is very, very fruitful.
Yeah, I like that point. So there are ways of making plastic less toxic by using less toxic chemicals. So we really need to do that, because there are times when we.
And the other thing I was thinking about is using bacteria to eat it. and some of the other problems that we've had.
Yeah, the bacteria idea doesn't really work, but there are alternatives that are being developed, like using mycelium from mushrooms. I will, and there also actually 3M, who has been a huge contributor to PFAS contamination, has developed a really cool cut paper packaging material that comes in these big rolls. They're using origami techniques, and you can bend the paper all around all kinds of objects. I think I have the resources for that too now, but I can send that out to you.
Well, thank you. It was a good talk. I enjoyed every minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Director.
Are you coordinating or talking at all to the plastics engineering department at UMass Lowell?
No, but there is a great organization up there that's been working on toxins. Trying to remember what TURI it's called, Toxic Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell. They do great webinars on the health impacts of plastics. I think they've had a shift in administration because I haven't seen any links to recent presentations that they were doing. Are you connected to UMass Lowell?
I used to work with the plastics engineering department there.
Okay. Yeah.
They would run seminars and things. But they must be working on materials that are not as toxic.
Yeah, I should look into that. Thank you for that tip. Yeah, I haven't. All I know about is the TURI Institute. Any other questions?
Steve, I can't see the chat. Were there questions in the chat?
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Wonderful.
I just texted my son about the artificial turf used at his children's preschool. He's wrote back and he said, theirs does not have rubber particles, but are there different turfs? Or,
No,
what should I say when I go in and complain?
Okay, well, the infill, he's talking about the infill. So a lot of people have talked a lot about that, the chrome rubber that was being used for the infill. So that was being made from Roundup tires. Tires are one of the largest contributors to microplastics in the air, and they're very toxic. So people for a long time protesting artificial turf were very focused on the infill of the chrome rubber. But the blades themselves are obviously made out of plastic, and they are also toxic. And you are still getting the breakdown of microplastics, and you are still getting the heat island effects. Like in Watertown, they installed this huge. Oh, the other thing about artificial turf is that it doesn't last. After 8 years, you have to replace it. And what do you do with it? There is no way to safely dispose of artificial turf. You cannot recycle it, no matter what anybody tells you. It will end up being incinerated if they're telling you that, or it's getting dumped in places like in New Hampshire and rural parts of Pennsylvania, Virginia. Yeah, so it all contains PFAS also. So New Hampshire, I think it was in Durham, New Hampshire, or maybe Dublin, I don't know. It was Southern New Hampshire. They had a huge fight. They wanted to have PFAS-free artificial turf. They thought it was all about the chrome rubber. Well, they installed it with a different kind of infill. In Watertown, they used something called Brock infill, which is made from white pine or yellow pine. And again, it has to be coated though with chemicals to keep it from becoming soggy when it rains. That's another issue with artificial turf, is that you are preventing the water from draining into the soil. So if you're interested in learning more about artificial turf, Dr. Kyla Bennett is a good person to contact. Tracy Stewart and Kyla Bennett are the first two people to figure out that artificial turf had PFAS in it, that it was being dumped. They took pictures of it I think it was in Franklin, Massachusetts. But Tracy is here in Massachusetts. Both of them are in Massachusetts. Kyla's in Easton and Tracy's in Medfield. And they are working, she's really working hard to get this municipal ban passed, which will make it so that no municipalities can install artificial turf. So anyway, I will send Linnell will have my contact information, and you are free to write to me. And I can also send you a lot of more resources about artificial turf.
And if you get that information to me, Steve Eisenberg, if you get that to me,
yeah, I'll do that.
then I will put that on the wiki so that other people will see it.
So I used to also be part of a group. We're on a hiatus right now. Maybe we've ended, but the Beyond Plastics virtual group, and we had some excellent speakers on artificial turf on that group. And I can send you a recording to that. And also, there's a woman named Sarah Evans who's at, I think she's at NYU in New York. She's also done great presentations. So I saw him going up in the room.
Seth has a question.
Hi, I'm out here. I don't know if you can see. This was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
In particular, it was great that you were able to cover some of the, as I call it, shenanigans of the plastic industry in creating the Chasing Arrow logo. My question is, has there been any work, for example, and I heard the EPA was looking to do this at one point, of actually banning that logo? Because my understanding is that logo is one of the big reasons why people are comfortable using plastic. I guess people refer to that as greenwashing, where they feel like, well, they're being responsible because they're using plastics that can be recycled. In fact, in Lexington, we have a waste initiative to reduce trash, to move towards composting and recycling. And I feel like there's been nothing in that initiative that's discussed the fact that much of the recycling that is put in is actually not recyclable because of this. So, I mean, I feel like just educating people so that they really know that most plastics recycling is not recycled, would go a long way towards changing public opinion on whether they're comfortable using plastic as opposed to moving back to things like glass or even compostable, cardboard or paper or compostable items.
Yeah, so that the Chasing Arrow symbol was developed in the late around 1970, right around the time of Earth Day, and it was. I mean, it's a great symbol for things like cardboard, right, and metal. But then the plastic industry totally co-opted it. But it's very hard to convince people that they cannot recycle plastic. They want to believe that. Even people I know, and I tell them over and over again, you cannot put this in your recycling. They still go ahead and do it because they feel guilty, right? They're eco-conscious.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that the knowledge about the health effects of plastics, I'm hoping that will finally convince people to stay away from it as much as they can. So that segues into advocating for refill stores like Center Goods. Erica's store in the center of Lexington, I think, is a fantastic store. She does not allow to sell food, but there is another store called Fulfilled Goods in Newton where they have bulk grains, flours, teas, all sorts of things, food, as well as a refillable shampoo, laundry detergent, all that kind of thing. There's also a food co-op in Maynard now. There's Deborah's Natural Foods in West Concord. There are good places to buy bulk food and to really reduce your exposure to plastic. So I highly recommend that. Bring your own. I have these cotton mesh bags that I take with me for produce when I go shopping. I've also made bags, cotton bags out of old t-shirts and old sheets with drawstrings in them for bulk beans and that kind of thing. But you can also take glass containers. You have to weigh them first if you're doing bulk, right? You have to weigh your glass container and then fill it up with whatever you're getting, lentils, chickpeas, nuts, whatever.
I mean, I think
I hope a lot of your people will come see the detox plastic film next week.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's good, but the percentage of people that are likely to ever start bringing cotton bags is so low that I'm guessing it won't actually make a difference. But what about, I mean, it seems like for everything or many things that I've used that are plastic, there are often compostable alternatives. Compostable plastic silverware, cups, etc. Is that better? I mean, it seems like on the surface that it's better. But again,
not necessarily better. And the main problem with it is it's not getting, especially children, it's not getting them away from the idea of the throwaway culture, right? We need to get people away from this idea that things are just disposable, right? We need to be back into a reuse, refill society. Like, I mean, when I was growing up, like Coca-Cola was reuse and refill. They would come and collect the bottles and refill them.
Yeah.
A couple of questions here.
Yeah, we had,
I
yeah.
think that you
Oh,
first.
yeah. And then you, and then the pleasure.
Maybe a general comment as much as a question on a few specific things, but it seems like the complete story here to appeal to me needs to have this this thing we're doing is bad and here's a better alternative. In a lot of cases, I'm not really hearing a full discussion of the better alternative. Like I recently heard a story. It so happens that my parents live near a golf course, and there was this fairly widely publicized story that the population near golf courses is especially susceptible to Parkinson's disease because of the pesticides or the fertilizers or whatever that they use. So it seems like artificial turf bad. Well, what if we made artificial turf out of recycled plastic? Or, I mean, is there not some way we could fabricate artificial turf in a way that would take away some of the bad qualities?
You know what the good quality, we already have the alternative, it's called grass, and we've been using it for years. And you can grow organic grass fields if they're well maintained for less money, and they're longer lasting, and they're cooling, and they're healthful, as opposed to artificial turf. There is no way to
artificial turf bad, do something else, and then letting people go off and plant grass and put chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers and
but we're advocating for organic grass fields. I'm sorry I didn't talk about
so
that.
It seems like that would be the more complete picture that you would need to sort of give people the alternative, because the simple messaging of this is bad. For one thing, it seems like, what if we made better versions of that? You're kind of closing the door to that. You're encouraging people to just think, oh, artificial turf bad. Maybe in 5 years we could make a really great artificial turf.
But why, when we already have organic grass? Why do we need to do that?
So are you saying you're just sort of fundamentally opposed to the idea of artificial turf?
I am. I'm completely against artificial turf. So artificial
that's
turf,
sort of a different story. Then there's something wrong with the artificial turf of today, right?
Yeah, it is wrong. Everything's wrong with it. Everything's wrong with it. Number one, it's replacing nature. It's replacing grass. So artificial turf is hotter than asphalt in the sun.
So what if you made a cool artificial turf?
It's still not going to be as cool as grass.
So you're kind of closing yourself to the possibility that we could solve some of the problems.
Totally. In terms of artificial turf, I'm totally opposed to finding an alternative.
I think it'd be good to be clear
I think if you, and I did talk about how what we need to do is we need to go back to how we were like 40 years ago. We don't need to invent anything new. That's the amazing thing about the plastic pollution crisis. We don't need any new inventions. All we need to do is stop making them out of plastic we're making now and go back to how things were before. I do agree that there are some medical uses for plastic and there are some other uses for plastic that we can do in a less toxic form, but most packaging and things like artificial turf do not need to be made out of plastic. And I also think that for construction.
Eileen, could you turn your camera on your computer so that when you're standing in front of everybody, we can see you?
Yeah, I thought that I was going to be in front of the camera over there, but anyway, the woman, yes, here.
We should not be using one single-use plastic bag, but we are using them. And some of us are bringing them to the supermarkets for recycling. Is that of any use at all?
No. So thin plastic bags are a kind of plastic film. They cannot be recycled. So we have put trackers in them. They have ended up, we meaning Beyond Plastics, and actually some people from my group itself did this. They end up mostly they're ending up in incinerators. Occasionally they end up at a place that does a little plastic recycling, but if you've ever been to a MRF, which is a municipal recycling facility, and I went to the one in PBD that services Watertown, you can see people standing over the conveyor belts where all the other materials are going, pulling the plastic bags out of the gears. They just get caught in the gears of the conveyor belts and the apparatus.
However, they are brought to some people bring them to the supermarket, which claims that they turn it into track.
So
furniture, lawn furniture.
Yeah. Have you seen that furniture? It's really poorly made and it breaks down very easily. And to make that furniture, you actually have to add more virgin plastic to it. So it's another greenwashing scam. So the thing that I get really concerned with is we have these plastic bag bans in certain communities. You're supposed to use, they offer you paper bags instead. Why aren't we seeing more people just bringing their own bags? I think we need to just ban the bags altogether. People need to go back, guy needs to go back to bringing their own containers when they go shopping. I mean, you go in a store though, and everything's packaged in plastic. It's not just the bags, right? It's the packaging. That's why we need good legislation to change that. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I like your comments on one thing that I think is a success story in this very bleak picture. And that is packaging of electronics, which admittedly are way too disposable themselves. But nevertheless, if you get a new cell phone every 5 years, you get a new TV set every 10 years, whatever, at least it used to come in these formed styrofoam blocks, which did a great job of protecting them against shipping, but what do you do with them after? And now there seem to be very clever cardboard structures for cell phones and computers and so forth. And, you know, Amazon tends to ship things in unbleached plastic, paper, craft paper rolls that I try to reuse for other things later. And can you describe how we got to this success? And maybe that'll give us some
a lot of
feeling
pushback.
optimism.
So in India, Amazon is not allowed to use any plastic packaging, and they can do it in India. They can do it everywhere because India has the legislation banning the plastic packaging. Third world countries do not have the resources to deal with waste the way we do, and they are seeing, you know, so much pollution in their streets affecting their health. And so I think the only way to go is to ban these things. And so the resources are out there. And also polystyrene, styrofoam is extremely toxic. We have several different local bans in Massachusetts, but again, that is something we really need to do on a statewide level. And like in Watertown, we just had a styrofoam recycling day. You really cannot recycle that stuff. It is very, very toxic. So yes, Fletcher, yeah.
Yes, I'd like to share some thoughts on the economics of bottle refunds. When I was a kid, the deposit on a Coke bottle was 2 cents. A candy bar was 5 cents.
Yeah, I remember that.
So 2.5 Coke bottles is a candy bar.
Exactly.
So that ought to be the price. The other thing is, adjusted for inflation, the original 5-cent deposit in Massachusetts, current 5-cent deposit in Massachusetts, should go to about 17 cents, I think it is.
I think it's more
today.
around 20 or a little over
Maybe.
20,
But anyway, the target should be 25 cents
So
because
so-
it'll be eaten up by inflation.
Yes, so the best bill that we have out there for the bottle bill actually has all these targets written into it. So currently Massachusetts, we're one of 9 states that has a bottle bill. We're lucky that we have one to begin with, but we are the worst functioning bottle bill, not just in the country, but in the world. We have the lowest rate of return, which is below 39%.
Well, that's
Because
because
of
it's
the,
not
because
worth it.
yes, so the incentive is if we don't reach a target, so we want to update it to a dime, right? And then if we don't get up to 50% of bottles returned in I think it's just like a couple years, then we raise it to 15 cents. And then if we're not getting up to 75%, you know, in 5 years, then we raise it to a quarter, right? So you keep going up with the amount that the bottles and cans are worth, and you keep raising the levels, the percentage of levels of bottles that are returned. That's the way the best bottle bills are written. Linnell?
Excellent talk, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to add a few things. Ridwell did come here to Lexington downstairs. The room was packed. Ridwell is, Eileen spoke about that. The room was packed and a lot of people are on board because they think, oh, I'm putting my plastic in the right place. So I'm trying to remind people, no, you don't want to go with Ridwell. You just want to reduce your plastic use. Also, artificial turf, Harrington. We had a big fight to try to stop artificial turf and we were successful.
Oh, that's great news.
So that's going to be regular grass, hardy grass, organic grass. So that's a good thing. Yes, artificial turf. If you've ever played on a field of artificial turf, it's horrible. My kids would end up with all these little pellets of plastic, and it was so hot on the grass. So, also, Mom's Organic Market in Burlington is another place you can go in. with your containers and fill instead of getting produce at Stop and Shop, which has plastic. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, thanks for all those tips, Lynell. Those are great. And I think I saw one more hand. Yeah.
I think you said something to the effect that compostable bags are not compostable. In other words, the bags we put are orange rinds and compost.
Yeah, are you
are
part
not
Black Earth?
compostable.
Yeah.
Black Earth will tell you that those are legitimately compostable, but most bioplastics, I don't know, I'm still a little bit skeptical, but most bioplastics are compostable. Plastics have a lot of additional chemicals in them.
So you're
But
saying that-
definitely participate in Black Earth. It is a good program. We need to reduce the amount of waste that we're
But
putting.
you're saying that they're not compostable.
Well, they have a facility that will compost them, but most compostable plastics, we don't have that research. You need a special kind of facility that's going to heat them up high enough. And I don't know. So Andrea Lacroix, who's also part of the Speakers Bureau, she lives in Ipswich. She has done a lot of research and talking to the director of Black Earth about their bags, and she's convinced me that they're okay.
So, well,
Eileen,
composting,
I'd like to give you one little
Compost-
bit of history, if I could.
Can you hold off, please? We have Seth in line before you.
Sure.
composting, it does not involve heat.
There is high temperature compost.
Yeah, they're high.
Well,
For that,
that's
for
not, that's
for
not
these things,
composting.
you
Time
need
out,
high
time out.
temperature.
One person,
That,
please.
that's not composting as we think of it.
No,
then.
it's not. It's not. That's
So
the
that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah,
What-
no, it's
what-
not.
what's
You
going
cannot put like what's called a compostable fork or spoon in your backyard compost and have it
So it's
disappear.
going through another chemical process,
Well,
if
it's
nothing else,
high
heating.
process, yeah. Anyway, let's do the people online. Is Bob the next person up? Bob Ellenson?
No, it's Seth. Seth had his hand up first.
Bob hasn't,
It was me. I didn't see his hand.
hang on a
Raise your
second.
hand, David. Go ahead, Seth.
It was just a comment about the bottle bill and recycling. It's sort of there's a more general comment about this, which is oftentimes people who structure programs use the wrong metrics. For example, is the goal of the bottle bill to increase the percentage of bottles that goes in that get returned, or the percentage of bottles that get recycled? Because I believe the percentage of bottles that get recycled is very high because people are just like, it's not worth it to take it to the grocery store and use that gnarly machine that's disgusting. So they just, eat the deposit and just put it in the recycling bin. I personally think that's perfectly fine. And my understanding is what's the percentage of bottles that are covered by the bottle bill? Okay, ignoring water bottles because they don't have a
right
deposit on
now-
them at the moment.
Right now, the only the only things are containers for carbonated beverages, right?
Yeah, and
The thing about bottle bills is there's no cross contamination. You might not like putting them in all the different bins, right, for plastic, glass, and aluminum, but that way the glass isn't shattering over everything else. You don't have, and it's only for food grade plastics, so you don't have like bleach bottles and empty pesticide plastic bottles contaminating the other plastics. It really is the best way to make sure that bottles and cans are turned back into bottles and cans. Yes, the bottles and cans that are going into your single stream recycling might be getting recycled to a degree, but they're not necessarily getting turned back into bottles and cans. Many of them are getting downcycled into like the plastic bottles that your bottled water comes in, they are getting turned into polar fleece, synthetic textiles that can be worn. Yeah, they can be worn for quite a while, but they're still shedding microplastics, microfibers constantly, and they can never be made into a bottle again.
So then what's unique about those bottles? Why isn't that applied to every form of plastic and every form of glass? Like, it sounds like you want to get rid of single stream recycling, right?
Yeah, I am totally against single stream recycling. It's not effective. It doesn't work. It's like you get glass shattered all over the paper. You get
So I guess the question is, why bother with having some small subset of recycling have these deposits on them? Why not advocate for deposits on everything? It's not economically viable. So either move to single stream recycling. It just seems like
I think most glass. Isn't most glass Well, I guess there's lots of jars
No,
that aren't beverage
of
trays.
course, most glass isn't covered by
Yeah.
very little bit of the glass is covered by the bottle bills. So, I mean, I think it's important when structuring these things to think about what the overall goal is and structure programs instead of just like,
Yeah,
here, we're going to
there's
charge
been
$1
lot-
to recycle a can of soda. And
There's
just
been a
go with
lot
people.
of thought put into it,
Yeah.
and the story of Stuff has done a lot of great research on bottle bills. Just Zero, which is a group run by Kirsty Pecci, that she's based in Sturbridge, but it's a national group, has done tons of work. The Container Recycling Institute, led by a woman named Susan Collins, not the same Susan Collins as the senator from Maine. They have amazing facts and statistics about bottle bills. I have been totally convinced by all these people that bottle bills are the best way to make sure that these bottles can't get effectively recycled. And in Europe, actually Michelle Sokola, your state rep, and Kirsty Pecci went to Europe a couple of years ago, and they studied how they are using the refill systems and that they have in Europe. And like glass bottles are getting used 64 times before they get broken up and recycled, right? So we need programs like that.
Well, right, but having a deposit on
We're going to move on to the next question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seth.
Bob Mellinson, could you unmute and go on ahead?
Thanks, Steve.
Bob Mellinson, you're muted. Could you unmute?
Yes, I can unmute. Eileen, I was just wondering if you've ever heard of an organization named Only One?
No, I have not. Tell me about it.
Oh.
Tell me about it. I'm not familiar with Only One. Is it like Only One Earth or?
They're heavily involved in the same thing you are. They've done a lot of work, I guess, in India. I was just looking at their website. Also, I probably should mention my son is CEO of it. So, so you could Google it and you'll come up with the organization, but it's interesting. You've never heard of it. Because they are kind of
with lots of climate groups and zero waste reduction groups, but I have not heard of that.
and
So
they
I will
plant
look-
trees and try to recover coral reefs and I guess mangrove trees. And they've had some success in particularly India trying to get plastic not to reach the ocean from the two major rivers. I don't know if they had any luck in this country, but
I will
but I
look into
thought
it. Thank you. Thank you for the recommendations. Everybody, Only One. We should look it up.
okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Questions, or do we want to call it a day now?
I don't see anybody else with their hand up.
Give you an optimistic note.
Sure.
People may not remember Jerry Brown, who's now retired, but he was a young man. He was governor of California.
Yeah, I remember.
And he was called Governor Moonbeam. And the reason he was called Governor Moonbeam, because he had this crazy idea that people should recycle plastics in newspapers. It was so far out.
Yeah. Well, the plastics was not a great idea, but the newspapers is good. So.
But then the whole business of the environment was considered so far crazy at that time. And now it's, it's completely mainstream.
Yeah, but we're in a lot worse shape now than we were when Jerry Brown was governor of California. But yeah.
Steve, were there any questions in the chat? We didn't see them here.
There were a number of comments about things, and I'd rather not read them. There weren't any questions posted.
Okay, so
I had a question. I had a question.
You can be next, Steve.
Oh, thank you. I should have raised my hand. Okay. One of the slides showed pineapple and other fruit in plastic containers because it's very convenient for somebody to pick up one of those containers and then have lunch. Understandably, we don't want to be using the plastic containers, but on the same stand, won't people want to be able to easily get a hold of cut fruit that they could take out or other food they could take out and eat for lunch? If we can't use plastic, how can we still satisfy the need for getting that cut fruit?
Why don't you buy an apple or a clementine or an orange or peel it or banana yourself? Just eat it. If you're having a pineapple, make it a celebration and invite friends over. If you feel like you can't eat a whole pineapple.
Well,
I ate 2 mangoes.
what I'll say
mangoes.
is somebody mentioned bringing your own container or possibly bringing a glass container or something of that, or a metal container, I think Jeff said he used.
I don't think that would be very helpful. I would be too worried. I personally, I would never eat that stuff because I worry about the health consequences, the bacteria and all that kind of stuff that can get into that pre-cut fruit and those prepared salads. So
See, there's a simple solution that really impacts two areas. If you hire a personal chef, you can get everything fresh and never worry about cross contamination and all this stuff.
That's a little expensive.
But it's
Bob
also
Primack has his hand up.
gets full employment, and we go with that.
Yeah, this is all about capitalism, you guys. Everybody's always trying to think of another way to make more money. You can charge more money for plastic that's pre-cut up and in a plastic container than you can for, an orange in its own wrapper. Yeah, was it Bob who wanted to ask a question online?
Yeah, Bob is here, right here in the corner.
Okay.
Where I live, which is a continuing care retirement community, the dining services have been persuaded to substitute for plastics compostables, and they're actually BPI compostable. They can go in black earth. That's often used for fruit and other kinds of things that you can carry out.
You should check out the Brookline Public Schools. Brookline got rid of all plastic and all throwaway containers in their public schools. It is so impressive. We did a field trip there last year. They are using metal trays that have dividers in them, so the kids don't, their food doesn't get mixed together, which a lot of children don't like. But they also only provide whole fruit. If you get a piece of whole fruit and you don't eat it, it gets back in the basket. They have, we went to visit a K through 8th grade school, and they have the first graders teaching everybody what goes in the compost, what goes to the dishwasher, how to sort everything out, or what gets saved in terms of the food. That is what I recommend for all institutions. I think we really, really, really need to get away from this whole throwaway culture, even if it is compostable, certified compostable stuff. We need to get away from that.
Eileen, a follow up on that. You said in there, if the apple isn't eaten, it doesn't get thrown away, it goes back. How do you get past the health code?
I think the Brookline Public Schools is following the health code. I mean, if you have a banana, nobody's eating it. You just put it back in the basket, right?
My understanding of the health code is that once it's been served, you can't.
This one I can answer because I actually volunteer to do exactly what she was describing in Lexington. And if a kid takes an apple and doesn't touch it, like they hold it, but they don't like take a bite out of it, you can put it back in a bin. Similarly, we have a bunch of plastic stuff. So if you have a little single-use plastic bag with baby carrots that you haven't opened, you can put them back in the basket. And then the people who work there will take it out of the basket and put it back on the shelf for someone else to use. Whether it's a health risk or not, that does happen here. However, if the kid takes one bite out of it, then it goes into the compost bin. And that's common with whole fruits.
The other thing I'll just add, when we're talking about health consequences, plastic actually holds on to germs longer than other surfaces, than glass and paper. So during COVID, the whole petrochemical industry convinced everybody that things wrapped in plastic were going to be more healthful, and you weren't going to get COVID if you touched something wrapped in plastic, and it's not true. So
wash them in bleach.
Yeah, right. Remember, I never really fell for that. I always like that. This is crazy, but. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope you will take the information you learned today out into the world, make your own individual choices, get involved in some kind of campaigning, come to the movie screening on May 5th at the venue. It's an incredible movie. I think you'll be really moved and learn a lot from the movie as well. So I'm glad you were here. You can take a look at my materials in the back of the room, sign up for my mailing list if you like. I will also send Linnell and Steve all the information about bottle bills, about films that you can watch, books that you can read. I have websites to look at. There's a lot of great resources out there. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.